you. It's great to see everybody here again. And this is a collection of a lot of efforts by a whole lot of people. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge our administration, Tom Berman, giving us the resources to really improve what we believe our recruiting footprint. Coaches have scoured most of the country and logged a lot of hours. Also want to acknowledge Gordy Haug, our recruiting coordinator, who did a great job organizing our coaching staff and myself as we went through this year, and the assistant coaches who really spent a great deal of time on the road, countless numbers of hours on the phone, and we believe this is a result of an excellent recruiting class. College recruiting actually, it begins a year ahead of time. Last year's class, while we were really pleased with, was a class that was pretty much cobbled together at the end. And this year's the first year's a reflection of our focus and attention, and I think you're going to see the rewards in years to come. What we did last year at the beginning, before we departed, we developed what we call the Wyoming profile, the guy that we were looking for, and did a lot of research when the University of Wyoming was successful, whether it was during Paul Roach's era or Joe Tiller's era. And what we found was two things that had not changed during those years. Was a young man who really wanted to come here and get a great degree, a meaningful degree from the University of Wyoming, and then along with that win the Mountain West Conference Championship and have a laser-like focus on those 2 points. And so we believe that we've signed 23 guys that have that in mind. We were very intentional with these guys. We were very upfront. We let them know what we were looking for. The class is a little bit more heavily laden with defensive players. 14 of the 23 were defensive players. Now, we may move some guys around. There are 9 offensive players in that. But there's some guys who I think are uniquely gifted, and then there's other guys who are going to be developmental players. A common question that's asked is which one of these guys is going to play as freshmen. That's going to be determined by one, positional need, physical ability, and emotional maturity. And so those things will come into play as we go into fall camp. So I can make a couple brief comments here, Tim, if that's what you want to do on each player, or just go ahead and open it up for questions. We'll open it up for questions, and then we're going to go through each one of the players that we did sign today. So any questions from the audience?
Craig, you mentioned it's kind of a little more defensive heavy. Were you happy with the distribution? It's 5 defensive backs, 5 linebackers, 4 defensive linemen. Was that kind of what you were after, or how did that work out? Yeah,
it was very close to what we were looking for, Robert. The thing that became apparent for us as our coaching staff in the Mountain West was this league is a league that it's a league that has great skill and great speed, and also a league that special teams come into play. And as you look at the body of work that we did this last year, we certainly have to improve on those areas. Special teams was a big point of emphasis for us as we went into this recruiting class, and many times those special team players are going to be players that are either safeties, corners, or linebackers. And so you'll see within this grouping not as many interior defensive players, but certainly perimeter and skill players on the back end. So we were well pleased with the guys that we attracted.
Did you fill all your allotted scholarships? You still have a couple scholarships left if dust settles or something, or
sure.
Where do you stand that way?
We do have one left, Robert, and we'll keep that in the pocket, and we'll pull that out at the right time. Yes.
Coach, you mentioned your footprint, and you talked last year about where you would like to recruit a lot. With the way things worked out, do you feel like you really hit the areas that you really want to hit in the future?
Well, we certainly do. If you look through, as we go through our listing, you'll see we signed 2 players from the state of Wyoming, and typically maybe the University of Wyoming has always signed 1, and we doubled that number, and so we made a real point of emphasis to recruit our state. And the next area was the state of Colorado, and specifically Denver. We're well pleased with the 3 players that we signed out of Denver. And then an area that had not been hit for many years was Nebraska. We signed 2 players from the state of Nebraska. So in that initial area right there, we're well pleased. Now, we certainly went out. Oklahoma turned out to be an excellent area for us this year. But if you look back into the Roach eras or the Tiller eras, Oklahoma had a strong presence on our roster. And so Oklahoma has been an area which we were well pleased with. California, certainly because of the Mountain West footprint, was important to do. Chicago is an area that has long been recruited by the University of Wyoming also, and so we signed a couple players out of Chicago, and then we were still able to maintain some ties in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So I think I may have brushed over a couple of areas, but that was kind of our initial footprint.
I wanted to ask too, it seemed like late in the process you got a lot of commitments from defensive ends and linebackers, and that was an area where you're losing a lot of guys last year.
Mm-hmm.
How important was it to kind of shore up those positions and get some young players coming in?
Well, it was critical for us at the defensive end position, and it was important for us also to have a composition of a couple high school players along with a junior college player, simply because we wanted to stagger out some of the distribution within that class. And so we were able to do that. We signed, we think, an excellent junior college defensive end who's going to have the ability and the maturity to come in and play right away, and then 2 players that they may or may not play. We may or may not redshirt, contingent upon how they are, but they're certainly more developmental players. But we're certainly pleased with that distribution there. I think Robert had a question.
You mentioned, there was 2 offensive linemen in this group. Was that kind of by design? Were you hoping to maybe get more, but just didn't work out? Or you feel good where you're standing, where maybe the next class is coming up, you might be a little more heavy in that area?
We hit a safety net of 2. There was another young man that we were recruiting. If we would have gotten a commitment out of him, we would have taken the commitment, but we just didn't feel, it was going to have to be a guy that was significantly above the line. The 2 guys that we signed, one's an inside player, meaning could either play guard or center, and another one is a tackle. And so that's the right distribution that we were looking for there.
Other questions? Mike?
Yeah, Mike?
Coach, you mentioned recruiting the state of Wyoming and how important that was. Why is that so important? You've talked about it before, but why was it so important in this class, not just for scholarship kids, but as all the preferred walk-ons and just the attention all throughout the state?
Well, we need to have more young men that are playing for the University of Wyoming instead of at the University of Wyoming. And that's not to say just because you're Wyoming that you're going to be more vested, but it's been our experience through the years when you have home state talent, the impetus and the drive and the determination, it's just a little bit more. And you can slice it, dice it up any way you want to. That's been our experience. And so we're going to hold true to that. And you will see us through the years look through every small town, every large city in our state, and be very diligent and very attentive to the state of Wyoming. So we're in hopes that the young men that come and wear the brown and gold from the state of Wyoming are going to represent the high school coach as well.